There was a man in your life, maybe there still is, whose financial decisions made your stomach tighten, not because they were a stranger, because they were close, a brother, a cousin, a friend you grew up with, someone whose number you still pick up when they call. And you watched them make a decision with money that you knew the moment you heard it was going to end badly. You said nothing. You smiled, or you stayed quiet, or you said, "Sounds good," when what you meant was, "This is a disaster." And then it became one. And somehow, in some small way, it touched you too. That is not bad luck. That is not coincidence. That is a pattern that Machiavelli identified 500 years ago and almost nobody talks about today, because admitting it out loud means admitting something uncomfortable about the people you have chosen to stay close to. Most men believe financial protection is about what they do with their own money, better decisions, smarter investments, more discipline. And all of that matters, but Machiavelli's thinking cuts deeper than that, and it cuts in a direction most modern financial advice is too polite to go. He believed your decisions are almost secondary if you have not first controlled your environment. A strong strategy executed inside a weak circle still collapses. Because the circle is not just social, it is structural. It shapes what feels normal to you. It shapes what you feel permitted to do. It shapes what you feel guilty protecting. You are not just making financial decisions in isolation. You are making them inside a web of relationships, expectations, and unspoken rules. And most of those rules were written by people who are not financially safe themselves. This is where the real drain begins. Not in your spending, not in your saving. In the invisible cost of being close to financial chaos that belongs to someone else. Think about what that actually costs you before a single dollar moves. When someone close to you makes a reckless financial decision and you know about it, something shifts in you. Your standards adjust. What seemed irresponsible 6 months ago starts to look normal because you see it repeatedly. What seemed excessive starts to feel moderate by comparison. This is not weakness on your part. This is how human perception works. We calibrate to what surrounds us. And if what surrounds you is financial recklessness dressed up as confidence, your internal compass starts to drift without you noticing. Then there is expectation debt. When the people around you operate at a certain financial altitude, spending freely, borrowing casually, treating money like it regenerates, they begin to expect the same from you. Not through demand, through assumption. The group dinner where nobody looks at prices, the trip someone suggests that you cannot afford to skip without explanation. The investment idea floated in a group chat where saying no means saying something about how you see them. None of this is direct pressure. All of it is pressure. And then there is the one that almost nobody names, reputation bleed. When you are consistently around people whose financial behavior is chaotic, that association says something about you to the outside world, whether you participate or not. People do not always separate you from your circle. They make inferences. The company you keep becomes a data point others use to calculate your reliability, your judgment, your seriousness. You can be the most disciplined person in a reckless group and still absorb some of the signal that group sends outward. This is what Machiavelli meant when he warned against allying yourself with men of weak fortune. He was not being cruel, he was being precise. He understood that failure travels, that a man whose finances are unstable does not just suffer alone. He creates gravitational pull, and everyone in proximity gets pulled toward the center of that collapse if they are not deliberately, structurally positioned away from it. Now here is the part that most men find hardest to sit with. You already know this. You have known it for a while. You have watched someone in your circle make a decision that you could see through immediately, and you said nothing. And the question worth asking honestly is, why? It is not because you lack the words. It is not because you did not care. It is because speaking would have cost you something in that moment. Social comfort, the relationship as it currently exists, the version of yourself that that person holds, the loyal one, the easygoing one, the one who does not make things complicated. Staying silent was the cheaper option in the short term. And you paid for it in a currency you could not see immediately. Machiavelli wrote about this dynamic with unusual clarity. He described the tendency of intelligent men to postpone difficult decisions because the cost of the decision feels immediate while the cost of postponing feels distant. But the debt accumulates. Every time you stay silent about something financially destructive happening near you, you are not preserving peace. You are borrowing against your own future exposure. The silence feels neutral. It is not neutral. It is a choice with a compound interest rate attached to it. So what does protecting yourself actually look like when the threat is not a market crash or a bad investment, but the financial behavior of people you know and in some cases love? The first move is one Machiavelli would recognize immediately. You build a wall that looks like a window. You create structural distance between your protected money and your visible money without announcing that you have done so. Most men operate with a single financial identity. What they earn, what they have, what they spend is all more or less visible to the people close to them. This is a vulnerability. Not because those people will steal from you, but because visibility creates expectation. When people know what you have, they begin to have opinions about what you should do with it. They begin to feel entitled to weigh in. They begin to feel, in some cases, that your surplus is a shared resource. The structural answer is not secrecy for its own sake. It is the deliberate separation of what you protect from what you allow to be seen, your lifestyle visible, your fortress invisible. Machiavelli called this the principle of appearing rather than being, and while he applied it to power, it applies to wealth with equal force. You do not need to lie. You need to stop volunteering information that creates leverage over your decisions. Think about how this plays out practically. Someone in your family finds out you have savings, not because you told them directly, but because you mentioned something offhand, a purchase, a plan, a number that slipped into conversation. Within weeks, there is a request. Within months, there is an assumption. The information you gave freely became the rope they used to pull you toward their problem. This is not malicious on their part most of the time. It is just human nature. People allocate available resources. And if you have made yourself look like an available resource, you will be allocated accordingly. The fix is not to lie about what you have. The fix is to simply stop making your financial interior visible to people who have demonstrated they cannot manage their own. The second move is learning to exit without declaring war. This is where most men fail. When they finally decide to create distance from a financially toxic environment, they do it loudly. They make a statement. They explain themselves. They justify their decision to the very people whose judgment they have already decided is compromised. This is a strategic error. An exit that requires explanation is not an exit. It is a negotiation, and you have already lost the terms before it starts. Machiavelli was ruthless on this point. He observed that the prince who announces his retreat invites attack. The prince who simply repositions and says nothing leaves his opponent with no clear target. Quiet withdrawal that looks like presence is not deception. It is protection. You do not owe anyone a detailed explanation of why you are choosing not to participate in their financial decisions. You simply become gradually less available. You are busy. You are sorting something out. You will look at it later. And later never quite arrives. Gradual unavailability is not betrayal. It is architecture. The reason men struggle with this is that they have been conditioned to believe that honesty means transparency. That if you have a real reason for distancing yourself, you owe the other person that reason. But think about what happens every time you have tried to explain a financial boundary to someone who operates differently than you. They do not hear your reasoning. They hear rejection. They hear judgment. They hear you saying you think you are better than them, even if that was never your intent. The conversation stops being about money and becomes about loyalty, about history, about what kind of person you are, and now you are defending yourself instead of protecting yourself. Machiavelli would tell you the explanation cost you more than the distance ever would have. The third move cuts closer to the bone. You have to separate your loyalty to a person from your exposure to their fortune. These are not the same thing, and most men treat them as if they are identical. You believe that protecting yourself financially from someone's bad decisions means you love them less, trust them less, value the relationship less. Machiavelli explicitly rejected this framing. He drew a hard line between a man's character and a man's financial situation, and he argued that confusing the two is how good men get dragged down by relationships. They had no reason to abandon, but every reason to restructure. You can care deeply about someone and still not attend every dinner that ends in splitting a bill you did not agree to. You can stay in a relationship and still remove yourself from the financial dimensions of that relationship that expose you to risk. These are not contradictions. They are the difference between emotional loyalty and financial entanglement, and learning to hold both at the same time is one of the more difficult things a man can do, because everyone around you will call it coldness. It is not coldness. It is the only configuration that keeps you solvent enough to actually help when something real goes wrong. Here is something that almost never gets said in this conversation. The man who protects his money from the chaos around him is often the only one left standing when that chaos peaks. And when it peaks, when the bad investment fails, when the debt becomes unpayable, when the financial disaster your cousin or your friend or your brother was building slowly finally arrives, who do they call? They call you, because you are the one who did not go down with them. Your protection was not abandonment, it was positioning. And your positioning is the only reason you have anything to offer when it matters most. The fourth move requires you to audit something most men never look at directly: how much your financial behavior has already been shaped by the people around you without your conscious agreement. This is the most uncomfortable one because it is not about what happens next. It is about what has already happened. Prolonged proximity to financial chaos does not just pressure you from outside. Over time, it rewires your internal threshold for what feels acceptable. Slowly and without announcement, a decision you would have refused 2 years ago now feels negotiable. A standard you once held firmly now feels unnecessarily rigid. You have not consciously changed your values. Your environment changed them for you, in the background, with your passive consent. The way you catch this is simple but unpleasant. You compare the financial decisions you were making before this circle became this close with the ones you are making now. Not to assign blame, but locate the drift, because you cannot correct for a current you have not identified. And most men are being carried by a current they refuse to name, because naming it means accepting that the people responsible for the drift are people they chose to keep close. Machiavelli had no patience for this kind of self-deception. He believed that a man who cannot clearly see the forces acting on him is not a free man, he is a managed one. And being quietly managed by the financial recklessness of people you trust while telling yourself it has nothing to do with you is one of the most common forms of captivity that exists. It does not look like captivity. It looks like loyalty. It looks like being a good friend, a good family member, a good person. But underneath the surface, your financial ceiling is being set by someone else's floor. And you have been living inside that ceiling so long it has started to feel like the sky. The fifth move is about information, specifically what you let in and what you act on. When the people around you are making bad financial decisions, they are also generating a constant stream of financial opinion, advice, warnings, opportunities, tips. And because these people are close to you, because you have history with them, because you have seen them be right about other things, you give their financial opinions weight they have not earned. This is not about dismissing people who care about you. It is about applying a simple filter that Machiavelli applied to every advisor around him. Has this person demonstrated with their own results that they know what they are talking about? Not in theory, in their actual life with their actual money, producing actual outcomes you can see. If the answer is no, then their financial opinion, however confidently delivered, however emotionally loaded, is noise. And one of the most expensive things you can do is mistake noise for signal just because it comes from someone you love. The men who fail to protect their money from the people around them almost never lack the knowledge. They lack the permission they are waiting for someone else to give them. Permission to step back. Permission to say no without explaining why. Permission to let someone else's financial disaster remain entirely their own. Nobody is going to give you that permission. That is the point. The men who figure this out stop waiting for it. They act as if they already had it, quietly, without announcement, without the dramatic exit or the confrontation or the explanation that satisfies everyone except themselves. You already knew that something in your immediate environment was costing you more than what showed up on any statement. The question was never whether to protect yourself. The question was always whether you were willing to be the only one in the room who did. The men who answer yes to that question do not announce it. They simply become, over time, quietly unreachable for other people's disasters. And that distance, that careful, deliberate, unspoken distance, is the foundation that everything else gets built on.